What's up, guys? Back in the garage. It's a couple days later since my last video. I'm gonna try and make some headway on the spare tire carrier setup. I'm still waiting on the parts from Rough Stuff Specialties, but I'm planning a wheeling trip this weekend, and I would really like to have this spare setup for this coming trip. So I'm gonna build a couple more tubes for the swing out itself. I got my spare tire wheel right here. You'll notice it is not a matching set. I just kind of got a old junker 35 that I was able to get my hands on. All right, guys, did some eyeballing and just doing some pictures looking at some pictures online, see exactly what angle I want to have the spare tire at. These tubes for my bed cage here are at a 45-degree angle, so I think it would complement it pretty good. I just did the same thing, just did another 45-degree angle here. So I got some welding wire and just kind of mocked up what kind of shape I was looking for. I want it to be pretty in line with the top of the bed on there, so it's not protruding over it, just to keep it kind of tucked. And got a basic measurement for how long of my top tube is going to be. Nothing exact because I don't have my tabs here and all that kind of stuff yet. So and bear with me here, my tape measure is in centimeters, don't ask me why. So I cut out a tube that is 180 centimeters. So got that all set up there. My tire, my spare tire here is 83 centimeters wide, so I know that is kind of the minimum how wide I want the middle of my tube to be, because the spare needs to sit inside it. Even though the middle of the tire is not going to be in line with the top tube, that's just the measurement I'm going to use in case I ever go to a bigger tire later. Just want to make sure I have enough room for that. So now that I got the tube cut, I need to do some math here. So I have, let's take a look here, get the calculator out. 180 total measurement. I'm going to subtract 83 centimeters off that, so 97 is my number after that. I'm going to divide that by 2, 48.5. So I need to measure 48.5 centimeters in from the outside of the tube on each side, and that's where my bends need to start going in. So that way I know the center of my tube remains at about 83 centimeters. So that's what I'm going to do, and we'll go from there. All right, now that we got worked out what the middle part of our tube is going to measure for our spare tire, now we got to figure out what angle we're going to bend them to. So like I was saying, I want the tire to kind of lean back at about a 45-degree angle. To do that, what I was doing, I was just kind of measuring off this tube right here. And what I did was, I'll just set the camera up so you can actually see what I'm doing, is I just had an extra piece of tube laying around, put an angle finder on it, put, roughly where this is going to fall, it's not going to be exact, and set this at 45 degrees, which is right there. Not hard. Just kind of want to put that right there. About 45 degrees. Measure straight out from where we're at. See where the center line of my tube falls. Make sure we're not moving around too much. Looks like it's about 33 centimeters or so, but actually I should probably measure from the middle of that tube. looking about 34 centimeters out. So 34 centimeters, that's how far out my tube needs to sit. So I know the middle of my tube is going to be 83 centimeters wide. It's going to sit out about 35 centimeters. And I need from that point where it's going to sit 35 centimeters out, it needs to kick to roughly this area where my pivots are going to sit. So I did some basic math. And so took my number here and ended up being about 45 degrees where my angle is going to be at. So that gives me a ballpark area to shoot for when I throw the tube in the bender. All right, got this tube bent up. I ended up having to throw a little bit more angle at it than I measured out. So I ended up about 55 degrees on each bend on here. So there's that top tube. So I'll be sitting around here. In hindsight, I actually kind of wish I brought these tubes a little bit up higher, but it is what it is. I think the spacing's gonna be a little bit tight, so we'll see how that ends up working. But in hindsight, I think I would have brought this tube up to the bed line. So is what it is. So it's getting late. It's a weeknight. Got to work tomorrow. So gonna wrap it up for tonight. We'll pick it up tomorrow. All right, guys, it's another day in the garage after work. So what I'm doing now, I'm kind of making some sort of a makeshift jig to start building this whole thing. So here is that tube right here that I bent the other night. I got two scrap pieces of tubing that I had laying around here. These are going to be my pivot points that the tire carrier is actually going to bolt to the truck and swing out on. So I'm just tacked these guys to these notches that I made on that tube. And then I'm gonna have this other tube right here. This is basically upside down right now. Bridge this across here. I need to shave this down a little bit so the fitment's perfect. Right now it's a little too long, but I did that on purpose so I can just whittle away a little bit at a time. So once I get this main bottom tube in here, again, it's upside down from what it's going to be in the truck, then I can start building some braces coming from the bottom tube to the upper, and then a middle tube that the tire carrier or the tire and wheel itself is actually going to bolt to. So gonna mill this down just a little bit, get the fitment perfect, and tack weld this. All right, we're looking pretty good, guys. Kind of got the tire laid up on there just to give me an idea that the angle and all that kind of stuff is what I am wanting, and it's looking pretty good. So I got that bar welded in, just tacked in. Now that I got it appropriately notched, now it's flipped back over, and now the spare tire is kind of roughly, where it's going to be. But I'm just kind of checking out the angle and all that kind of stuff and how it sits on there. Just kind of propped it up right there, but it's leaning a little down, so it's going to be a little bit more kicked up once it's standing how it's supposed to be, but it's looking pretty good. I'm really liking this. Again, I'm still waiting on some parts. I need to see how the Rough Stuff spare tire plate actually attaches, if it's just a flat plate or if it has anything on the back, and that'll dictate whether I'm going to run like just one single tube down the middle of this, or if I need to run two. Either way, I'm going to have something going down the middle and then some additional bracing in there just to make it nice and strong and make sure this guy can take some abuse. So let's take that tire off and start mocking up some support tubes. All right, this is looking pretty good. So got this tube here notched out, and that fits great. So now I got to get this notched. Now this one's going to be harder to think about. I'm going to have to kind of probably make some cuts and kind of cut up high and see how it fits and kind of guess and check here, because in theory, this should be a 45-degree angle, but we're kind of running into this tube right here. So it's going to dip down, which would make it more. But I'm going to start with the 45, and what we'll end up having to do, we'll probably having to take some material out on this side. But I don't want to leave a big gap right here and cut too much. So starting with the 45 right here should put it where I need to, and then I'll probably have to hand grind this outside to match perfectly with this tube. So we're going to do that and see how it looks. All right, got that angle cut. I made sure I give myself a lot of wiggle room on here, just so, again, I can kind of sneak up on this notch to make it look good. So it's definitely way too long, but again, I did that on purpose. So, but we can kind of get an idea as to how this is going to sit. So kind of what I was shooting for was it to sit kind of in this area. So we put it in this area and kind of line it up with where it's going to be. With a 45-degree angle, you can see that there's a nice gap in there. No gap on the outside, but on the inside, there's a pretty good sized gap, and we want to minimize that as much as possible. So it's a good thing I did this, because now I know I need to do, I need to take a little bit of angle out of the notch. So again, this is 45 degrees, and you know, if it's right on this tube, it's perfect. That's 45 degree, but this thing's a little bit longer than that, and it's going to be landing on this bend right here. So I need to take some angle out of it so it sits correctly again, and I'd rather have to manually use the grinder, take some material out of this side, then leave a giant fat gap on this side. That's going to make a ugly weld, and it's not going to be straight. All right, I finally got my notch figured out. That one was a bit of a pain in the butt, having the notch land right on a bend, and being a lot more of a pain in the butt than I thought it was going to be. So, you know, you guys saw my issue was earlier where I was having too much gap and stuff like that. I actually needed to kind of twist the bend a little bit because this is kind of falling away from the tube. So I kind of changed the angle of my notch and changed it to a 35-degree angle, so it looks real kind of funky and stuff like that on there. Had a bit of a brain fart, and I twisted it the wrong way, but it worked out in my favor because I can end up just using it on the other side. So now this guy fits right down in there. That fits right up in there. The gaps ain't perfect, but it's pretty tight. You know, I've got a little bit of a gap on the outside edge, but I'd have to restart with a new tube, and I'm not building a roll cage or anything like that, but it's going to look good. It'll make a pretty decent look weld, but it's not 100% perfect, but I'm going to be happy with it. So now I'm going to show you guys a trick now that I spent all this time making this notch right here. You know, I'd probably spent a good 30, 45 minutes on it. I'm going to show you guys how to transfer this same notch onto another tube without having to spend any near amount of time that we just did on this one. All right, guys, so we're going to transfer over this this funky notch that we just made, that we just spent a bunch of time, I keep saying we, like I got a mouse in my pocket, that I spent a bunch of time making. So how I can transfer this, you need to break out the real expensive tools, a little bit of paper, a Sharpie, some tape, doesn't matter what kind of tape, and some scissors. So let's get to work on this. It's going to look like that. Again, you don't want any of the tube sticking out. I start the top of the paper off the highest point of my notch, and then now we're going to take the Sharpie and just draw a line on the paper following the tube. And then boom, we've got a funky shape right there. So now we're going to cut that out following that line that we just made. So now, since we're going to be mirroring this on the other side of the tire carrier, you know, when I made my sketch here, basically, whatever you want to call it, I had it going this way, I marked this side. We're gonna flip it around and wrap it around basically the opposite way onto this other tube. And I'm gonna start with this notch first, 20/20 hindsight. Start with your hardest notch, that way you can not waste as much tubing as possible. Because this one is a pain in the butt, whereas my first notch that I made was just 2 45-degree angles, and that was really, really easy to do. So if I ever had to do that again, that was really simple to do. That just takes a couple minutes with the notcher, whereas this one takes quite a bit of time. So now that we got it transferred on here, now we're gonna go backwards and then bam, you've got a nice mark to follow, and we should come out with a notch now that is real similar to our other one, in theory. So it probably won't be perfect, but it'll get us real close to the ballpark, and then we can kind of eyeball it from there. So we're gonna follow this, cut it out, and see how it looks.